Joining us now on Sports Talk ATL, Fox 5's Miles Garrett. He is back with us. Thanks so much, Miles, for taking a bit of time out of your day. Busy sports day in Atlanta. Adam Duvall is back. We just talked about that. Kirk Cousins, we got tampering, we got signings. This is one of the busier days in the Atlanta sports calendar for sure.
Oh, easily. Yeah. I mean, Desmond Ritter gets traded. Rondale Moore added. Kirk Cousins yesterday. It looks like Cordero Patterson on the way out here with the Falcons. So a lot of transactions happening here in Atlanta, specifically the Falcons here.
Yeah, let's start with Kirk Cousins though, right? Because that's the big signing. That's what everyone wants to talk about. He met with the media yesterday for the first time. And you know what I got out of that? I watched that and I said Raheem Morris. There was a lot of times, a lot of people that didn't like the hire. I necessarily wasn't the highest person on it. I didn't hate it, but I wasn't the highest person on it. And I'm watching Raheem Morris's first press conference, and it's like, it's impossible not to like this guy. And then I kind of felt the same way about Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk Cousins has got a much different personality. He's a little quirkier, but you could tell all he cares about is winning and the commitment to his craft. And some of the things he was saying was like, this guy cares. Like, this guy cares.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think you know that when it comes to Kirk Cousins. Now, look, this guy, he may not be a top 5 quarterback in the league. He may not even be top 10. I think at his best, he's kind of bottom half top 10. I used to always kind of have him in the same category as Matt Ryan. Matt Ryan kind of being at the top of that category, Kirk Cousins being sort of middle of the pack. But basically like a guy that you can win games with, that will get you to the playoffs with the right supporting cast. And I think the Falcons have that good supporting cast. I think they're assembling a good supporting cast, obviously now with Darnell Mooney and Rondale Moore now, who was traded for Desmond Ritter. So you're adding some speed there in the slot. They probably will address receiver once again in the draft, I suspect. They've got some good bodies in there right now. Cordero Hodge, another guy they re-signed this morning. So the room is vastly different than what it was last year. You know, you have Matt Collins as your number 2 guy. Obviously, Cordero Patterson, another guy who kind of played a couple different positions for you, that Joker role, whatever that might be. But yeah, no, it's a vastly different looking offense right now. Obviously, with Zach Robinson calling the plays now instead of Arthur Smith. But yeah, I mean, as far as winning a press conference is concerned, I think Kirk Cousins at least did that yesterday. I think he said all the right things, kind of fired up the fan base, talking about, you know, what it means to have a close relationship with the city. I mean, his whole family's from here, or on his wife's side, rather. You know, they got married here. He talked about how, you know, he watched a lot of Falcons games in his father-in-law's basement and really saw the passion, and he wants to kind of help change that of sorts, you know, bring a championship to Atlanta. So all that considered, I think he said the right things, and Falcons fans should be excited.
Yeah, I mean, that wide receiving core that you mentioned, I think those were the 2 biggest needs. Kirk Cousins obviously fills the quarterback need. Then you have Rondale Moore, Darnell Mooney, Cordero Hodge is back. At least in terms of depth, you filled a lot of that holes. Now, we'll still see if they have wide receiver at their top of their draft board. And if a guy like a Doomsday or Neighbors is there, that almost is starting to see a little bit like overkill. But as we've seen in the past, you know, best player available. And they certainly could be the best player available. I thought one of the more intriguing things that also came out of this press conferences was that kind of budding relationship he seems to already be having with some of the players, in particular Kyle Pitts. Now, Kyle Pitts joked about the number 8, you know, and Kyle Pitts said, I just want more targets, which was funny because he was joking, but in every joke, there's a little bit of truth, right? And let's be real about what happened the last 2 years with Kyle Pitts, with Desmond Ritter, Taylor Heineke, and what's his name, Marcus Mariota, throwing him passes. Like, he was not getting the targets, and you could tell there was frustration. Now, injuries played a part, but there is some truth to that statement. There's no doubt about it.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I mean, you talk about Kyle Pitts. I think there's a lot of, I think more on the local side, I think more of an understanding of the Kyle Pitts story per se than it is from a national standpoint, because, I mean, let's go by year with Kyle Pitts. His rookie season, when he does have competent quarterback play, he breaks every rookie tight end record there is. That second year, Marcus Mariota, not very good. And then he gets a devastating knee injury. You know, his numbers obviously aren't that good. Last year, I think it was obvious he wasn't 100% there on the field. And later we found out that he wasn't 100%. I mean, just because of the severity of the surgery that he was recovering from. And of course, the dismal quarterback play Atlanta had. So all that considered, you finally have a Pro Bowl caliber quarterback once again here for the Falcons. I do think there's something to the fact that Kirk said that Kyle reached out to him. It wasn't the other way around first. Kyle was the one that started that dialogue with Kirk Cousins. And as you said, Kirk Cousins mentioned specifically just wanting to go out and have individual film study dating all the way back to their college days with all those young guys. He said Bijan Robinson, Drake London, Kyle Pitts. He wants to look at all their stuff from, USC, Texas, all those places, which I think is saying a lot. I think that speaks a lot to the leadership of Kirk Cousins and sort of that veteran presence, playoff presence of a quarterback that this team has missed since Matt Ryan, because those are the things that he did. We've heard all the stories of Matt Ryan being a film guru, and that's what the great quarterbacks do. They live in the film room, they study, they know the tendencies of their primary targets, and it looks like Kirk Cousins is already doing that.
Yeah, I mean, we had Big Low Country on here yesterday, and he told me I had to go back and watch the quarterback Netflix special that featured Kirk Cousins. Now, a lot of Falcons fans were watching Marcus Mariota because we wanted to see, how that relationship ended, because it kind of seemed like he gave up on the team, and I didn't really pay attention to Kirk Cousins. But one thing Alex said is that attention to detail was so transparent through like how much he cared and how much it took him to get to this point, because he wasn't, a highly drafted, a highly touted prospect, and he's turned into one of the richest quarterbacks in the history of this game. Now, that's also tremendous business on his side, but he's taken a lot of hard work to get there. And back to the wide receiving core real quick, Miles, because I want to hear this point that I want to make and what you think about it. These wide receivers that they've got now, Drake London has only caught pass from Desmond Ritter and Marcus Mariota throughout his career. Kyle Pitts, we just mentioned the struggles that he's had with those two guys since Matt Ryan left. Darnell Mooney has only caught passes from Andy Dalton, Nick Foles, and Justin Fields. And then you look at Rondale Moore and what's happened with Kyle Murray and the injuries and what's happened there. You've kind of got this like island of underachieving toys, right? Like they're all like, this was a second round pick in Rondale Moore. This was Darnell Mooney, who caught 1,000 yards before Justin Fields took over. You have obviously what we think we have in Kyle Pitts and Drake London, two ultra talented players. And now they finally all get a chance under Kirk to play with Kirk Cousins, who's known for making the most out of these receivers. He's known for Adam Thielen having career years, Stephon Diggs, Justin Jefferson. The guy gets his guys the ball. You can say whatever you want about the playoff success and whether he's a top 5 quarterback in the Achilles, whatever. The guy knows how to get his wide receivers the ball. If I'm those 4 guys, I am the happiest person. I'm the happiest people on the planet right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And I do think there's something to the fact that, it's a vastly different room, just sort of from a physical standpoint, because what sort of receivers and pass catchers did Arthur Smith go after? They were usually very big body type guys like Mac Hollins. Obviously, Drake London, Kyle Pitts are still on the roster, but guys like that, Van Jefferson, another guy who's just very big. I think that was a focus that they did for a while with Arthur Smith. And now, you bring in speedsters like Rondale Moore and Darnell Mooney, who is a little bit more of that different slot guy who can kind of cut it upfield and get open deep. And guess who was the most accurate deep passer last year? Kirk Cousins. So I do think that they kind of work hand in hand, and I do like the offense that they're putting together. Does a Malik Neighbors potentially fit into that personnel? I mean, if you get
ridiculous.
If you get guys like that and like Odunze, there's no excuse for this team now going forward, especially on offense. You have all the tools. Maybe there is a argument now as far as the offensive line is concerned. Maybe a Joe Alt falls right into your lap, and I think that would be a tremendous pickup if he falls there at pick number 8. But yeah, I mean, you've given yourself a lot of options right now to get the ball to. And I mean, again, that was the mantra we had this season with the Falcons, right? With Arthur Smith, we said if there was competent quarterback play, average quarterback play, you've got Kyle Pitts, you've got Drake London, Bijan Robinson, Cordell Patterson, Tyler Algier, all these names. I mean, we thought Mac Hollins was even going to maybe do something based on what he's done in his career. So, you consider all those things. Hopefully they are able to figure it out this year with more of a, different setup with more wide receivers instead of the 2 tight end set with Kyle Pitts and Jonnu Smith. But there are some things to like, and, you have to trust the fact that Zach Robinson, a Sean McVay disciple, seems like a lot of his disciples have ended up working across the league. I mean, if he's able to turn this offense around very quickly, don't be surprised to see him as a head coaching candidate next year. So, all those are good things to really consider with this 2024 Falcons team. And look, they don't really have a choice than to be good this season, because if they're not, there's going to be a lot more cleaning house next year.
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, I think Terry Fontenot, you're talking about a fourth-year GM that hasn't had a winning season, and I think he's done a good job, and I do think the Falcons are on the right path. But if the results don't show up on the field, someone's going to get fired, and I don't think it's going to be a first-year head coach and Raheem Morris. Speaking of getting fired, Arthur Smith, you brought up about his weapons and stuff like that. Now Desmond Ritter gets traded immediately as he walks out the door. Is that kind of like, does that show you a bit of the picture of what was going on behind the scenes and who wanted Desmond Ritter to be the starter? Because to me, I think I like the deal. Now that Rondale Moore was traded, I was like, that we got him. I was like, this makes a lot more sense. This makes a lot more sense. But do you think, that kind of gives you a peek behind the blinds of what was happening?
I don't know if it necessarily gives you a peek behind. I don't think we'll ever really know, what was going on behind closed doors with, was Dez ready to start? I know we've seen a lot of reports or things online saying that, some people didn't want Desmond Ritter, and, maybe they were trying to call Matt Ryan. I saw some people tweet about that, this past year, and was there different discussions? I do know this. When I went to the Combine last year and spoke to Terry Fontenot, he went out of his way, because I didn't even mention specifically Desmond Ritter. I said, who is one guy that has stood out to you the most in this draft process? When it came to like these interviews, who you like. And he said Desmond Ritter. I mean, he flat out gave the reason why he liked Dez. So because of that, you have to assume that was a Terry Fontenot move, whether that was his move or his idea to have him start as quickly. Again, who really knows? But, it's, you never really know with these types of things. And, maybe it'll come out eventually with Arthur Smith, now that he's a offensive coordinator, and maybe we find out later down the line. But I think for now we never really will figure that out. But for the time being, I think a Rondale Moore swap for Desmond Ritter is a steal, just given the production value. Desmond Ritter was going to be a backup at best, and now you get a starting caliber player in return for him. So I like the move, and I think it's a win-win for Atlanta.
Yeah, I mean, when I saw that he was on the verge of getting traded, I think it was Zach Klein that reported it first, and then it got confirmed by Jonathan Jones, and we finally figured out it was Rondale Moore coming back. I assumed it was going to be, Mac Jones got a 6th-round pick. I assumed it was going to be a 7th-round pick, like maybe a conditional 7th-rounder that we never even see or something like that. So the fact that we got a starting caliber player for that, or at least valuable depth at a position of need, was kind of shocking. Now the question to me, and we'll end this segment on this, is, what happens with Taylor Heinicke? Is he now clear-cut for sure staying? Because I think most people assumed he was going to be a cap casualty, because I think the Falcons can save somewhere around $5 to $7 million by moving on to him. Now, you have Kirk Cousins coming off an Achilles injury. They may value a backup quarterback more than, another team because of that injury. Or is this case, the Rams have kind of just flown with whatever the hell is behind Matthew Stafford. They've kind of just not really cared about the position. Is that something that they take, and they want to just say, hey, if Kirk Cousins gets injured, we're screwed anyways. We're still going to cut Taylor Heinicke. We're going to pretty much have nothing behind him. Maybe it's Logan Woodside. I don't know. Because as we saw last year, listen, Heinicke's okay, but you ain't winning games with him.
Yeah, and I do think that, I'm of the belief that they like Taylor Heinicke. I think they want to keep him on the roster. But as you said, I think the consensus was that, he'd be an easy, casualty. You can kind of use that money elsewhere and, get a younger quarterback, or even keep Desmond Ritter as your cheap backup option, because I think at a minimum, what you saw at a Desmond Ritter, he wouldn't be a horrible option to be your backup quarterback. Now, you bring up a good point. Kirk Cousins, major surgery, Achilles injury. That's not the easiest injury to come back from, and you want to have adequate depth behind him. So all that being said, I wouldn't be surprised if the Falcons address quarterback in the draft. It just depends on where that might be. I do think that if Drake May somehow ends up falling to 8, I don't believe he will, but I do think that if he does, there is a very high likelihood that Atlanta takes him, because I think you get a guy like Kirk Cousins, going to be 36 years old this year. Drake May, generally considered that, guy who maybe needs a year to sit and watch. I think it's a perfect scenario for you, because you get a top 10 talent. You're ideally not going to pick in the top 10 for a couple of years, hopefully, with this new regime. So you're picking at pick number 8. You get a guy like that to fall right in your lap. It's really hard to pass up. Now, outside of that, because I don't think that will happen, I think it's just hard for a guy like Drake May being considered a top 4 pick to fall all the way to pick number 8. Maybe you take a chance on a Spencer Rattler, a guy who shows a lot of potential per se with all the intangibles, the arm strength, the speed, all that kind of stuff. Am I sold on Spencer Rattler? No, but I do think that he is a good project. You could maybe spend a later round pick on, maybe a 3rd or a 4th. While addressing receiver, offensive line, edge in the first couple of rounds, like maybe you should. So because of that, I do think they will address quarterback in the draft. It's just a matter of how the chips play out.
Yeah, I mean, you opened up a can of worms to end the segment, but that's definitely something I'm going to have you on and talk about again later as we approach the draft, because Drake May, great point. JJ McCarthy's a guy that could be sitting there at 8 that probably needs a year or 2 to sit. I like the idea of Spencer Rattler. There's a number of guys, and I do not think that the Falcons are going to have 3 quarterbacks on the roster. So I definitely think that a quarterback in the draft makes a lot of sense, and I'm glad that you brought that up. Miles, thank you so much for joining us today. You are the best.
Thanks for having me on.